This is Learn English with Ease.
English made powerful, simple, and yours.
The moment someone asks you a question in English, something strange happens inside your body. Your heart speeds up just a little. Your shoulders tighten. Your mind, which was calm a second ago, suddenly feels watched. And even though you understand the question perfectly, your thoughts don't move the way they usually do. They rush, then scatter, then freeze. This is not a language problem. This is a nervous system reaction. And if you don't understand that, every English lesson will feel harder than it needs to be.
Most learners think, if I just learn more vocabulary, this will stop. Or, if I practice grammar more, I'll feel confident. But the brain doesn't work like that under pressure. When your brain senses evaluation or judgment, it shifts into protection mode. It stops prioritizing fluency and starts prioritizing safety. That's why your English feels different in real conversations than it does when you're alone.
There's a name for this in psychology. It's called cognitive load. When your brain feels threatened, it uses energy to monitor danger instead of producing language. That's why simple sentences suddenly feel heavy. Not because you forgot English, but because your mental resources are being pulled in two directions at once.
This is why telling learners to just relax never works. Relaxation is not a decision. It's a biological state. And the fastest way to change that state is not by forcing confidence, but by sending your brain a signal of safety.
So before we talk about sounding fluent or natural or impressive, we need to talk about something much more basic. How to keep your brain calm enough to function while you're speaking, because calm is the foundation of fluency. Without it, nothing else sticks.
Let's start with the most dangerous moment in any English conversation. The silence right after a question. That pause feels small, but your brain interprets it as risk. Silence feels like exposure, like everyone is waiting, like time is running out. This is why many learners rush their first words or start speaking before their thoughts are ready.
Here's the key idea. Silence is only dangerous if it's empty. But silence with intention feels normal. Native speakers pause all the time, but their pauses don't feel awkward because they label them. They signal thinking. And that single signal completely changes how the silence is perceived.
There's a sentence that does exactly that. It's short, simple, and extremely powerful for your nervous system. Let me think for a second.
When you say this, three things happen at once. First, your brain receives permission to slow down. Second, the listener stops expecting an immediate response. Third, the silence that follows no longer feels like failure. It feels like thought. This is not about buying time. It's about removing threat.
Notice how your body feels when you imagine saying it. Your chest relaxes a little. Your breath slows. That's not imagination. That's your nervous system responding to safety. Because now the conversation is no longer a test. It's a process.
This is what many learners don't realize. Fluency doesn't come from faster thinking. It comes from slower pressure. When pressure drops, your natural language ability comes back online.
Now let's talk about another hidden fear that blocks English. The fear of being wrong. Many learners don't stay silent because they don't know what to say. They stay silent because they're afraid of committing to an answer. Their mind says, "What if this is incorrect?" And that hesitation builds tension before the first word even comes out.
In cognitive science, this is called error monitoring. When it becomes too active, it interrupts speech production. Your brain starts checking instead of expressing. To calm this system, you don't need correctness. You need flexibility.
There's a phrase that introduces flexibility into your speech. I'm not sure, but I think.
This sentence lowers the stakes of everything that follows. You're no longer presenting a final answer. You're sharing a thought. That distinction matters deeply to your brain. Because thoughts are allowed to be incomplete. Answers feel final. Thoughts feel safe.
Listen to how different this feels. I'm not sure, but I think the meeting starts at 10. Your voice naturally sounds calmer because you're not carrying the weight of certainty.
What's important here is not the phrase itself, but what it communicates. It tells your brain, I'm allowed to explore out loud. And exploration is much easier than performance.
Another common trigger for panic is when your sentence doesn't come out the way you expected. You start speaking, realize it's not quite right, and then your mind panics again. Many learners stop mid-sentence or apologize repeatedly, which increases tension even more.
But fluent speakers don't panic when this happens. They adjust, they correct, and they do it without emotion. Because self-correction is not failure, it's refinement.
There's a phrase that gives you permission to refine your thoughts without stress. Actually, what I mean is,
This phrase does something subtle but powerful. It reframes the mistake as progress. You're not fixing an error, you're clarifying meaning. That shift keeps your confidence intact.
actually, what I mean is that we should start a little earlier. Nothing about that sounds weak or broken. It sounds thoughtful.
Notice a pattern forming. These phrases don't make your English more advanced. They make your communication safer. And safety is what allows fluency to appear.
Now let's talk about listening. Many learners believe they must always respond with something impressive, but real conversations are built on understanding, not performance. When you truly understand someone, sometimes the calmest response is acknowledgement.
There's a short sentence that does this beautifully. That makes sense.
This phrase reduces pressure instantly. You're not expected to add more. You're not rushing to contribute. You're signaling connection. And connection is the goal of conversation, not output.
That makes sense. I see what you mean. This kind of response keeps conversations flowing without activating anxiety.
Another situation that triggers stress is misunderstanding. Many learners pretend to understand instead of asking again. This creates internal tension, because now they're trying to respond without clarity.
But confident speakers value understanding more than image. They know that clarity prevents bigger problems later. Asking again is not weakness, it's control.
There's a simple sentence that restores clarity and keeps your tone calm. Can you say that again?
When you add, I want to be sure I understand, it becomes even more grounded. You're not apologizing, you're being responsible.
What all of these phrases have in common is that they communicate presence instead of perfection. They tell the other person, I'm here, I'm engaged, I'm thinking. And that's all a conversation really needs.
Now let's move deeper. There's one pressure that sits underneath all the others. The pressure to defend yourself when you speak, especially when you're sharing an opinion. Many learners feel their body tighten because they expect disagreement or judgment.
This triggers a defensive tone, even when you don't mean to sound defensive. Your voice hardens, your words become rigid, and the conversation feels tense, even if no one is arguing.
There's a phrase that softens this instantly. I'm just trying to explain.
This sentence lowers emotional intensity. It signals cooperation instead of conflict. And when emotional intensity drops, your speech becomes smoother.
I'm just trying to explain how I see it. That doesn't sound aggressive. It sounds human.
And now we arrive at the most important shift of all. This is not just a phrase. It's a mindset that changes how your brain experiences English entirely.
Most learners believe they must be correct before they speak. This belief creates constant tension. Your brain treats every sentence like a test, but communication is not an exam. It's an exchange.
There's a sentence that removes this internal rule. It's okay if I'm wrong, but
When you say this, you're doing something radical. You're giving yourself permission to be imperfect in public. And that permission unlocks fluency faster than any textbook ever could.
it's okay if I'm wrong, but I think we should try a different approach. That sentence feels relaxed because the speaker is not protecting an image. They're sharing a thought.
This is the moment where many learners experience a shift. They speak more freely. They pause naturally. They stop replaying conversations afterward. Because the pressure to be flawless is gone.
If you look back at everything we've discussed, you'll see that fluency is not about pushing harder. It's about removing internal resistance. When resistance drops, language flows.
English becomes easier not when you know more, but when you feel safer speaking with what you already know. And that safety starts in the mind, not the mouth.
When you stop treating English like a performance, it becomes part of who you are. And when that happens, confidence is no longer something you chase. It's something that quietly appears.
When safety becomes part of how you speak, something subtle changes in the way conversations feel. You stop bracing yourself before every sentence. Your body no longer prepares for impact. And because of that, your attention shifts outward instead of inward. You're no longer monitoring every word you say. You're listening, responding, and adjusting naturally.
This outward attention is important. In neuroscience, attention is a limited resource. When most of it is used to judge yourself, there's very little left for language production. But when self-monitoring quiets down, your brain has room to access words, structures, and expressions that were already there.
This is why many learners are surprised when they sound more fluent in relaxed situations. It's not that their English suddenly improved. It's that the internal noise finally went quiet enough for their ability to show itself.
Now let's talk about another common moment that triggers panic. Being interrupted. You're speaking in English, your sentence is going okay, and suddenly someone jumps in, asks a follow-up question, or changes direction. For many learners, this interruption feels like failure, like you lost control of the conversation.
But interruptions are not a sign of poor English. They're a sign of engagement. Native speakers interrupt each other constantly. The difference is how they respond to it. They don't rush. They don't apologize excessively. They reclaim space calmly.
There's a sentence that helps you do exactly that. Let me finish this thought.
This phrase is calm, respectful, and confident. It tells the listener that you're still processing something important. And when you say it, your body stays upright instead of collapsing inward.
Let me finish this thought, and then I'll answer that. That sounds composed, not defensive.
Another interruption that causes stress is internal. It's when your mind interrupts you. You start a sentence and halfway through, your brain says, "This isn't good," or "This sounds wrong." That inner voice is one of the biggest enemies of fluency.
That voice is part of your error monitoring system. It's useful when you're studying alone. But during conversation, it needs to stay quiet. And one way to quiet it is to give yourself a verbal bridge.
Here's a bridge that works extremely well. What I'm trying to say is,
This phrase buys you cognitive space. It allows your sentence to evolve instead of collapse. You're not restarting, you're continuing.
what I'm trying to say is that this approach might work better in the long run. That sounds thoughtful, not broken.
Notice how many of these phrases protect continuity. They keep you moving forward instead of stopping. Fluency is not about never stopping. It's about knowing how to continue.
Now let's address another deep fear, sounding foolish. Many learners carry an invisible belief that if they make a mistake, they will be judged harshly. This belief comes from school environments, exams, or past negative experiences. But real conversations don't work that way.
Most people are not analyzing your grammar. They're following your meaning. When your meaning is clear and your tone is calm, small mistakes disappear from attention.
There's a sentence that helps shift focus back to meaning when you feel exposed. What I mean is,
This phrase gently redirects the listener's attention to your idea instead of your form. It keeps the conversation anchored in understanding.
that this solution saves time overall. The listener hears clarity, not imperfection.
Now let's talk about speed. Many learners believe that speaking faster equals sounding fluent, but speed under pressure often reduces clarity and increases anxiety.
Fluent speakers are not fast. They're well-paced. They adjust speed based on thought, emotion, and situation. And one of the simplest ways to slow down without sounding unnatural is to verbalize thinking.
There's a phrase that does this beautifully. That's a good question.
This sentence does more than acknowledge the question. It slows the rhythm of the conversation. It gives your mind time to organize without signaling difficulty.
That's a good question. Let me think for a moment. This feels controlled, not hesitant.
Another moment learners struggle with is disagreement. Expressing a different opinion often triggers fear of conflict. This fear tightens the body and stiffens the voice.
But disagreement doesn't have to feel like opposition. It can feel like exploration. And language can help frame it that way.
Here's a phrase that keeps disagreement calm. I see it a bit differently.
This sentence opens space instead of closing it. You're not rejecting the other person. You're adding perspective.
I see it a bit differently because from my experience, that sounds balanced, not confrontational.
Let's pause and notice something important. None of these phrases are complicated. Their power doesn't come from vocabulary. It comes from timing. They appear exactly when pressure would normally rise.
That's why memorizing lists of advanced expressions often doesn't help. Under stress, your brain can't retrieve them, but simple, emotionally aligned phrases stay accessible.
Now we need to talk about recovery. Because no matter how prepared you are, there will be moments when a sentence collapses completely. A word disappears. The structure falls apart. And for many learners, this feels catastrophic.
But fluent speakers recover quickly, not because they don't make mistakes, but because they don't emotionally react to them. Recovery is a skill, and like any skill, it can be practiced.
There's a sentence that helps you recover smoothly. Let me start that again.
This phrase resets the moment without shame. It keeps your dignity intact, and it tells the listener that clarity matters more than speed.
Let me start that again. What I wanted to say was, that sounds calm and deliberate.
Another recovery tool is humor. Light humor reduces tension instantly. You don't need to be funny, you just need to be human.
A simple sentence like, that didn't come out right, can completely dissolve pressure.
When said calmly, it doesn't draw attention to failure. It acknowledges reality and moves on.
As you use these tools, something deeper begins to change. You stop seeing English as something separate from yourself. It becomes a medium, not a measurement.
And when English becomes a medium, your personality starts to come through. Your pauses feel natural. Your opinions feel grounded. Your voice feels like yours.
This is where real confidence comes from. Not from sounding perfect, but from feeling present. When you're present, mistakes lose their power.
In the next stretch of this conversation, we'll go even deeper into how to rewire your speaking habits so calm becomes automatic, not something you have to remember. Here's the key. Your brain learns patterns faster than it learns rules. If every conversation triggers tension, it creates a habit of panic. But if you repeatedly use small, safe phrases under pressure, your nervous system starts associating English with safety. Over time, this becomes automatic. Calmness replaces anxiety, not because you practiced grammar more, but because your brain expects survival instead of threat.
Think of it like walking on a new path. At first, every step feels risky. You overthink, hesitate, maybe stumble. But the more you walk it, the less your body reacts. Eventually, you move naturally without thinking about balance. English works the same way. Every time you allow yourself to speak safely, your fluency improves quietly, almost invisibly.
Let's look at another high-pressure moment, when someone asks for your opinion and you're not fully confident. Many learners feel a sudden urge to defend, justify, or over-explain. Your sentences stretch unnaturally, words pile up, and your voice tightens. This is cognitive overload in action.
The first step is to acknowledge internally that you're allowed to have an incomplete thought. You don't need to present a final verdict. One phrase that does this elegantly is, I feel that.
I feel that we could try a different approach. Notice how simple it is. There's no perfection requirement, no hidden judgment. Your brain interprets this as safe expression. Your listener interprets it as genuine participation.
Another technique is labeling your process. When you explicitly state that you're thinking, your brain stops panicking about speed. One powerful phrase is, let me explain what I mean.
Let me explain what I mean. It signals pause and thought simultaneously. Your body relaxes, your voice steadies, your words arrive more naturally.
Many learners don't realize the power of these metaphrases. They feel small, almost invisible. But that's their strength. They manage the invisible pressure that comes with speaking in a second language.
Now consider emotional tension in conversation. If a topic is sensitive or you fear disagreement, your chest tightens, your jaw clenches, and your words shorten. Emotional tension is the silent killer of fluency, but language can mitigate it before it even escalates.
One phrase that diffuses tension instantly is, I understand your point, and
I understand your point, and here's another perspective. See the difference? You're acknowledging, not attacking. You're humanizing the dialogue, which lowers the stakes in your own mind and the listener's mind.
Another invisible fear is self-judgment after mistakes. Learners replay conversations in their head, criticizing themselves for every mispronunciation or grammar slip. This rumination reinforces anxiety, which makes future speaking harder.
You break this cycle by creating verbal shortcuts for forgiveness. A simple line like, "It's okay, I meant," allows your brain to release tension instantly and continue forward.
It's subtle, but over time, it rewires expectation. Instead of fearing failure, you anticipate adjustment. Instead of freezing, you anticipate continuation. And repetition is key. The more you practice these phrases under real conditions, the more automatic your calmness becomes.
Now let's explore speed and thought alignment. Many learners think fluent speech requires thinking faster than their natural pace. But speed is an illusion. Fluency is synchronization between thought and speech. When your mind is calm, you naturally slow to the right rhythm and words arrive without effort.
A phrase that signals thought without rushing is, "That's interesting. Let me consider."
That's interesting. Let me consider the details. See how it extends your thinking window without tension? You maintain control over your pace, which prevents scrambling, which prevents anxiety, which allows clearer sentences to emerge.
Next, we address a critical subconscious pattern, over-apologizing. Many ESL learners insert unnecessary apologies mid-conversation. "Sorry, I mean," or "sorry, I'm not sure." These phrases communicate doubt and insecurity, even when you're sharing useful ideas.
The solution is rephrasing with ownership. Swap sorry for clarity signals. For example, "What I mean is," or "actually."
Actually, we should start earlier to match the agenda. Notice how calm, deliberate, and composed this sounds. Your mind relaxes because the sentence provides both structure and safety. The listener's mind relaxes because the language communicates confidence, not defensiveness.
Let's move to another high-impact moment, when vocabulary fails mid-sentence. The word disappears and panic surges. The instinct is to stop, pause, or fill with meaningless sounds. But fluent speakers recover instantly. How? They normalize the gap.
The phrase, "let me find the right word," creates space without signaling failure. It communicates thoughtfulness, not weakness.
Let me find the right word, and continue. The brain interprets this as control regained. The listener interprets this as engaged, intentional communication.
By practicing these recovery phrases, your neural pathways start expecting safety, not threat. You stop interpreting minor pauses as judgment, and that reduces cortisol spikes, which otherwise tighten your throat and scramble your thoughts.
Here's a subtle but critical point. The goal is not to memorize a list. It's to internalize a safe framework for speaking. These phrases act as anchors in real time. When pressure rises, your anchors stabilize thought, voice, and body simultaneously.
Anchors also help with long-form speech. When sentences are extended, learners often panic halfway through. By dropping in subtle anchor phrases, "actually," "I see," "let me think," they maintain rhythm, coherence, and calm simultaneously.
Let's pause and observe a pattern emerging. Every phrase we've discussed serves three functions at once: reduces internal pressure, signals intent to the listener, preserves rhythm and clarity. That triad is what converts knowledge of English into usable, calm communication.
Finally, consider emotional neutrality. Many learners react to perceived judgment from the listener. A gentle signal that you're reasoning, exploring, or clarifying prevents emotional spikes. Language, at its best, becomes a regulatory tool for your nervous system.
That's why in these conversations, the focus is not fancy vocabulary or grammar mastery. It's strategic phrasing. These sentences subtly manipulate the emotional environment so your brain can access language effortlessly.
And when your brain can access language effortlessly, fluency stops being an aspiration and becomes a byproduct of calm, intention, and strategic response.
Next, we'll move even deeper into practical sequences that combine these phrases to handle high-pressure dialogues, interruptions, and real-life challenges seamlessly. Let's take this one step further. When you combine these phrases into sequences, you create what I like to call a fluency safety net. It's not magic. It's strategic language that guides both your mind and the listener through tense moments without panic. For example, in a conversation, you might start with, "Let me think for a second," then move to, "I'm not sure, but I think," and finish with, "What I mean is."
Notice how these three phrases alone do three things. They slow your brain, protect your sentences, and signal clarity to your listener. Each phrase reinforces calm, and together they form a rhythm that feels natural. Your sentences are no longer fragile. Your English stops being a performance and starts being a conversation.
Interruptions or unexpected questions? The safety net holds. Words disappear mid-sentence? The safety net holds. Emotional tension rises. The safety net holds. This is why experienced speakers appear effortless. They're not faster. They're not better. They have internalized strategies that protect their mind and body while speaking.
Let's look at a real example. Imagine you're explaining your idea, and someone challenges it. "I see your point, and here's another perspective. I'm just trying to explain how I see it." Let me think for a second. I'm not sure, but I think this approach might work better.
Notice the flow. Every phrase is intentional. Every pause communicates safety, clarity, and thought. There's no panic, no scrambling, no overcompensation. This is the natural rhythm of calm English.
Now let's talk about another layer, identity. Most learners feel they must perform as a good English speaker rather than expressing themselves. This mindset increases tension and reduces accessibility to your existing skills. The key shift is to speak as yourself, not as the version of English you think is perfect.
These phrases allow exactly that. It's okay if I'm wrong, but signals permission to speak imperfectly. Actually, what I mean is signals thought refinement. Let me think for a second. Signals cognitive space. Each phrase gives your brain permission to exist in the conversation without fear.
And when you speak without fear, something remarkable happens. You stop replaying conversations in your head afterward. You stop worrying about every word you said. You notice that your English was not perfect, and that it didn't matter. Communication flowed, ideas were shared, understanding happened, connection happened.
Fluency at this level is invisible. It's not flashy. It's calm. It's deliberate. It's human. And human communication is always imperfect. The sooner your mind accepts this, the sooner your English feels effortless.
This is why many learners plateau. Not because they don't know enough vocabulary or grammar, but because their internal environment is tense. By managing your emotional and cognitive state with simple phrases, you unlock language that was already inside you all along.
Let's summarize the core principle one last time. Every phrase we discussed serves three purposes simultaneously: reduces pressure internally, maintains clarity externally, preserves natural rhythm. When you practice these phrases in real conversation, these three functions reinforce each other, creating a feedback loop that gradually builds confidence, calm, and fluency.
The power of this approach is compounding. One calm conversation improves your next one. One sequence of safe phrases trains your brain to expect success instead of threat. Over time, speaking English stops being an ordeal and starts being a skill you naturally perform without anxiety.
And this is the difference between knowledge and usable skill. Knowledge is words in your head. Usable skill is your ability to access those words under pressure while staying calm. That's what separates learners who plateau from learners who grow consistently.
So when you leave this video, remember, it's not about memorizing long lists, impressing anyone, or speaking flawlessly. It's about embedding safety, calm, and intention into your English. Your voice, your rhythm, your presence, these are the true markers of fluency.
Start small. Use one phrase today in a real conversation. Observe how your body responds. Notice the tension melting, even slightly. Tomorrow, try 2 phrases in sequence. Slowly, naturally, your conversations will become calmer, smoother, and more confident.
And here's the final thought. English becomes easier not when you study more, but when you treat your mind and body with respect. When you give yourself permission to pause, to think, to adjust, to be human. That's when English stops feeling heavy and starts feeling effortless.
So speak freely. Pause when needed. Correct yourself without fear. Explore thoughts without pressure. And remember, calm English is not about perfection. It's about presence. When you bring presence into every sentence, every conversation becomes an opportunity to communicate, not to perform.
Your journey with English is a journey with yourself. Every phrase you use, every pause you take, every correction you make, these are not mistakes. They're signals of growth, intention, and confidence. Keep practicing, keep observing, and notice the change that happens naturally over time.
And with that, remember, fluency is not a race, it's a rhythm, a calm, steady, human rhythm that flows as naturally as thought itself. Speak, pause, reflect, adjust, and your English will finally feel like it belongs to you.
Thank you for joining us today. Practice these phrases. Notice the shifts in your confidence and calm. And remember, the goal is not perfect English. It's real English, spoken calmly, clearly, and confidently. Your journey is already underway.